Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Great to see such a fabulous crowd out here. I'm Jeannette Calandra. I'm the managing partner of PwC Silicon Valley office, so good to be back here in New York, my hometown. But I'm joined here this morning with Tara Levy, who's the VP of Agencies and Brand Solutions. So Tara, maybe just kick off. Tell us a little bit more about your role, your responsibilities at Google, because I'm sure it goes well beyond search.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. It's exciting that you do this in my hometown still. And yes, so my team focuses on moving the people who are moving the industry. And so we have teams who focus on helping agencies to take advantage of the latest technology solutions or consumer insights on behalf of their clients across, still a lot of search, but also these days, video, display, platforms, cloud, really everything that Google has to offer them. There's also a set of teams that are, in essence, specialists who are focused on getting ahead of what they're seeing in terms of consumer trends and developing the new brand solutions to help meet those. And so they work with leading advertisers and the agencies on things like creative, measurement, multicultural audiences, things like that. So we get a pretty good look at a set of cross-cutting industry issues. And I guess I would say, given that it's upfront season in New York, we're spending a particular amount of time these days on video.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us here this morning. So as Mark talked about, and as your role reflects, we're at Convergence 3.0, and this is coming from multiple directions. With respect to the video platform, YouTube has been in the forefront of this for many years. And when I think about Convergence, I'll use my own case study here of my 12-year-old daughter, right? She consumes YouTube by, her and her friends surrounded around her mobile device watching the latest whingy slime-making videos, right? And if we're also lucky, she'll cast that up on the family TV so we could see that disgusting trend in full view. And she's, taught herself to play the flute, watching, videos on her Chromebook. And during the NBA Finals here with the Warriors, woohoo! No other Warriors fans out here? Okay, thank you.
More of a Celtics fan myself, but.
But with the Warriors in the finals here, you couldn't help but see all the promotions for YouTube TV, and now my daughter is asking me, when can we have that, Mom? So that's my 12-year-old, but tell us what you're seeing really out there when it comes to consumer behaviors.
Well, it's interesting. I think people are coming to YouTube for a pretty wide range of reasons, right? You just named several of them: entertainment, education, how-to. Some of you may have seen in the Journal yesterday, they were talking about the new phenomenon about study videos, where they literally, they're not actually being taught in these videos, they're just having someone study with them. It's literally a video of someone else studying while they study. So the range is wide. But I'll pick the NBA example, and in part because you just mentioned the Warriors, in part because I saw David Stern walk in. The NBA is one of our stronger media partners, and I think really exemplifies the Convergence 3.0 theme that's being highlighted. Because if you think about it, it was funny, actually, I had this issue with my husband. He was watching some highlights on YouTube on our television set at one point in the day, and then he turned and he was watching actually the game on his phone. And so I was asking him, so do you think of that as like which of those is online video, which of those is TV? Sure. And my husband's a lawyer, he's not in the business, and he's like, I don't understand the question. Why are you asking me that? This is just all video. And so I think that is the convergence that we're seeing happen in the industry and on YouTube. And it's interesting because, look, we're increasingly mobile, as Mark kicked off with, and as our watch time continues to grow, mobile is holding pace. It's still 60% of the watch time, but actually the newest, biggest trend is around people watching YouTube on the TV set. So they are watching upwards of 150 million hours a month on TVs in the living room, which makes it our fastest growing screen. And interesting that that's working the other way too, where people are watching more traditional television on YouTube on whatever device. So they're watching roughly 2 times the traditional TV content that they did last year on YouTube. So we're seeing more YouTube on TV, more TV on YouTube. That convergence only continues to accelerate.
Yeah, I think you're just seeing that total interchangeability when it comes to that screen, and this next generation is really not, looking at it any differently where they see it.
And we're trying to make that easier for them, right? So if you think about the changes that we made to the app, for those of you who use the YouTube app across multiple screens, you will see the user interface, the recommendations, the way you sort of work through it is different, seamlessly different, based on whether you're watching on a giant screen or on a tiny phone. And then obviously, you mentioned your daughter and YouTube TV. That's in some ways the ultimate convergence, where we're trying to bring consumers both traditional networks and endemic YouTube content all in one place.
Sure. So, well, flipping it to the advertising side now, how are advertisers capitalizing on this trend?
Well, look, I think advertisers have always wanted to be where viewers are, right, and where viewers are engaged. And one of the biggest problems that we hear over and over is that with the explosion of content and places where you can watch content, advertisers have an increasingly big problem with cord cutters and people who are essentially light TV viewers, so they're not watching that much on traditional television. And I think Nielsen actually reported something recently that said, almost 50%
of the 18 to 49-year-olds, right?
Yeah, exactly, are difficult to reach through traditional television. But 90% of that audience is on YouTube. And so that's a pretty big opportunity to connect for a lot of our advertisers. And we're trying to make it easier for advertisers as well. So we recently launched a new audience segment called Light TV Viewers, which is basically people who are consuming most of their video and entertainment content online. And so we're making it easier for advertisers to reach and connect with those folks where they would have a hard time elsewhere. And again, they see the same benefit around YouTube TV, which is the ability to buy your traditional linear spots and your online video spots all in one place.
Fantastic. Well, very exciting. And you talked about the upfront season here, and you're always come to the table with something new. This year is adding the YouTube TV inventory to your premier or preferred advertising platform, which is Google Preferred. Can you talk a little bit about that program and how is that beneficial to the advertisers?
Sure. So for those who aren't familiar, Google Preferred is, as mentioned, our upfront offering where we make it easier for advertisers to buy the top 5% of channels or videos on YouTube. And it's interesting, it really emerged about 5 years ago out of the industry, out of Convergence, either 1.0 or 2.0 or whatever it was, around business models, right? So if you think about it, traditional TV typically anchors on trying to build audiences around 1 or 2 or 3 big programs and then spreading that wealth around to the rest of their content. By contrast, YouTube and many other online video players are trying to aggregate audience across a whole slew of content. And so that just creates different challenges for the advertiser. And so what they said to us was, hey, we love the viewership, we love the engagement, we need you to make it more easy for us to buy universally. And so we launched with the top 5%, which represented our most popular and most engaged content, and also ways that they could buy that were comparable to television around audience guarantees, unskippable ads, things like that. And that, again, we're very grateful for our partners who gave us that feedback and that help, because today that allows YouTube to compete in the upfront with television networks. And frankly, most of the top 100 buyers are big GP buyers. So what's new, we try to innovate every year. Couple things. We this year we made some new content announcements around the accessibility of Vivo, which has all of the premium music library in the world. That's now available through Google Preferred. We shared some new originals that are either renewals from last year or new, and we shared what we're doing with YouTube TV, which I think, again, was very exciting for people who are looking to buy all types of content in one place. There was also some ad innovation around, some of you may have seen, we launched 6-second ads a little over a year ago, and we are making those available now in Google Preferred. And similarly, we launched some advanced audiences and capabilities to really connect across YouTube and the rest of our platforms, which we made available in Google Preferred also. So, knock on wood, demand seems strong. We'll keep the conversations going.
Fantastic. So with Google Preferred, right, you're taking the advertisements and you're matching it to Google or YouTube's top content. And I would say top content, does that equate to safe content? Mark spoke a bit about trust. It's obviously, a significant conversation in the industry today. Can you talk a little bit about, your mission around brand safety and trust, and specifically, how does Google Preferred advertising help in that journey?
Sure. So we're very committed to having a relationship with the ad industry that is based on transparency and trust and creating value for brands. And we've been laser focused on the issue of brand safety on YouTube for well over a year. Some of you may have seen in January, we announced a pretty sweeping set of changes that I'd say bucketed into 3 themes. One was around the need for humans along with machines to vet brand safety and to bring that nuance to understanding what it is that we want or don't want on the platform. So we committed to bringing on 10,000 human reviewers. We're almost at that point. We also committed to making Google preferred are absolutely most vetted content from the standpoint that every single video in Google preferred, any ad that runs in front of it will have human monitoring and verification before an ad goes live, and that has been a fan favorite in the announcements. So it is, as you say, not only our most popular, but our most vetted content. The two other major trends, one was around monetization, and we had already upped our standards for what made a channel eligible for monetization. We found we had to up them even further around watch time and subscribers to avoid people who were trying to game the system. So that basically sort of shrunk the available body to monitor in the first place.
Right.
And then the third piece was really being just much more proactive in trying to anticipate new trends or new things that would pop up on the platform that we could sort of nip in the bud. So things like the Tide Pod challenge that you guys might be familiar with, that was something we were able to see before it really exploded, and therefore get it off much, much faster. And our ability to work with third parties to ensure that they were seeing what we were seeing around brand safety. So the effect of all of these is that we're now seeing, we are roughly 99% effective at getting ads off of content that brands would not necessarily want to be in front of. That was the target that we had agreed on with our partners as best in class. In an open platform, you're never going to get to 100%. But we're really grateful for the industry partnerships that have come together. I think the learnings that we've had collectively over the last year have made a big difference. And the feedback from our clients is they're incredibly happy with progress. The journey is never going to be over, so we're going to stay on it, but we feel like we're in a much better place today than we were a year ago.
No, absolutely. So, but I got to believe that when it comes to brand safety and trust, right? This applies to all formats of media. How does television learn from digital? How does digital learn from television in this area? What are you doing to collaborate around that?
We definitely do hear, in particular from customers and agencies, that brand safety is an industry-wide issue. And to your point, in both traditional and digital media, I think we are trying to focus first and foremost on sort of owning our issues and making the changes that we need to get folks comfortable that YouTube is a brand-safe platform. And we do hope and believe that a lot of the insights and learning and changes that we are making in the recent months and the months ahead will be a beacon for others in terms of how the industry evolves.
Great. Well, we'll keep on going forward. And thank you for sharing on that current and important topic. If we go back to some of the innovation for a moment, you talked about the 6-second ad. When I was in Cannes last year, there was some amazing, creative that was showcased. I think I'm still addicted to one of the mascaras that was shown. But tell us a little bit about the journey of the 6-second ad. How did you get there? And now that you've had some time to really work with it with the advertisers, is it truly successful?
The 6-second ad was actually an example of when I was highlighting earlier that we're always trying to watch what's happening for consumers and figuring out how best to address that. And what we were seeing was that there's plenty of times, especially with unrestricted content, that people are absolutely willing to engage in longer form advertising. If anyone checks out the YouTube ads leaderboard, which shows the top ads each month, on average, those ads are over 2 minutes. However, we saw there were a lot of moments, particularly mobile moments, very much on-the-go moments, when people really were not willing to watch much more than 6 seconds. I mean, we could see it in the skipping behavior.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we wanted to help brands do was connect with more people in more moments in a way that would enhance rather than annoy or interrupt them. And so the 6-second ad was born out of that insight. I will be honest, I was originally reasonably skeptical about whether it would be effective. I grew up in a traditional environment. I just didn't know, would 6 seconds be enough time to tell a story? Would the creative industry accept or reject it? And would it deliver results? But I have to say, I have had to eat a lot of crow internally because it has been tremendously successful. It turns out that from an adoption standpoint, creativity loves constraints. And so the creatives have, to your point, really embraced and come up with some amazing executions. Yeah. And from an effectiveness standpoint, we see that when these shorter ads are used in the right mix, in the right moment, they're packing a punch that is equivalent to their longer form cousins. So I think we're going to see more and more 6-second ads. Roughly a third of our largest advertisers use them today on YouTube. And I think we will see more of that, not just on YouTube, but as you may have noticed, this consumer behavior is affecting everyone everywhere. And so the 6-second ad has already been adopted by Facebook and many of the TV networks, Fox, A&E, a couple of others, and I think we'll see that trend continue.
It's funny, you mentioned two things to me that ring out as philosophies of Google overall. One was the creativity loves constraint, right? I see that, applied all across Google. But the second one is getting to that 6-second ad. You talked about how you use the data from the skippable ad and really can kind of see where people were kind of, where they had their interest until. So
Absolutely.
Fascinating. So what are some of the other ways, though, you're experimenting and innovating when it comes to ad formats across your platforms?
So when you think about convergence, I mean, one of the biggest asks that many marketers have had for us for a long time is to do a better job connecting the 7 platforms we have that have over 1 billion users, all of which now can give you some instinct on what people's intentions are. Right. And people's intentions are what help you capture their attention, right? That was the whole thesis of what made search so successful in the first place. But in a mobile world now, we can see things about intention on apps, on maps, on all of these other areas. And so it took us a while to get there, but late last year we were able to launch in a privacy-safe manner the ability to connect these and to let you tap into people's intentions across things like maps and apps and search for your advertising on YouTube. And so these advanced audiences are generating a lot of just interesting examples where you can imagine, for example, someone who's advertising on a Bruno Mars video or something like that. Like, we might know some content preferences from what they do on YouTube, but only now do we know, based on some of their other behavior, that they're also interested in fashion and really looking for a lot of opportunities to work out. And that creates tremendous opportunities for brands to message in a way that will be more effective. So the early results across hundreds of campaigns show that brands who are using intent signals like that are seeing roughly 20% increase in ad recall lift and 50% in brand preference lift. And so those results are as powerful as the noise was about why didn't we do it earlier. So that, I would say, is one big innovation that we're continuing to roll out. The second is around TrueView. So TrueView was our original innovation way back when, in terms of the fact that the ad was skippable. The other thing that people were really pushing us for was the ability to optimize that ad against things beyond views, because marketers, so marketers have lots of different objectives, and in some ways they're converging. So we are now able to let folks optimize TrueView for reach, for actions. So that could be anything from conversions to store visits to lead gen. Okay. And again, that lets people both be more intentional in what they're doing to try to match to the moment and the audience, and also to have a much better sense of efficacy. So
really merging the performance with the brand advertising all in
many cases. In many cases, yeah.
And examples of some companies that are doing out there and doing a good job at it when you're seeing those advertisements?
Sure. I mean, it's interesting because if you think about it as a consumer, right, as a person, like, brand and performance have always been converged for us, right? There's no reason, if you think about it, if I'm doing a category search for great vacations, or a search for how-to or a product review on YouTube, like, which is performance and which is brand. Sure. I think what's always limited advertisers are the constraints in the platforms, right? But we, television, others, like, we've never been able to mix and match as seamlessly as we have now. The fact that we now can, I think, is leading some leading brands to really think hard about how they use their traditional product silos and to mix and match a little bit differently. So, for example, Hawaiian Airlines actually had an interesting campaign where they were using people's search activity for Hawaiian vacations to essentially generate awareness of what they were doing. And they were actually then trying to connect with those people who were doing those searches on YouTube by driving them to actually book a flight. And so it's interesting because they really had flipped it, where search was their awareness vehicle and video was their DR vehicle.
You would normally think about it the other way.
Exactly, which was radically different for them. And they found, when they compared to their traditional approach, they had actually increased the bookings by almost 50%, and they had cut their cost per booking in half. So it was really working for them, and I think really just startled, actually, their team, their agency, and everybody else. But I think we're going to see a lot more of it, especially, I'll give you another just very simple example of why. Lyft did something really interesting where they wanted to engage much more deeply in the sort of brand performance convergence, but they were worried about their creative, and they didn't know if they had the right creative. And so they started testing simply the straight-up DR creative that they had and the brand creative that they had in a converged way on YouTube, where they were trying to drive to the same action, irrespective of which creative. And what they saw was actually an absolute mix. When you rank the creatives from top to bottom, there was really no differential between the DR creative and the brand creative in terms of how they performed. And in fact, the top performing DR vehicle for them was one of their straight up brand campaigns. So I think we're just at the beginning of seeing what people will do with this, but it's very encouraging.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun with all this innovation. So,
Totally.
so going in a different place, but still on innovation, let's talk about the voice assistants out there. I think if we polled this room, most of us would probably have some sort of device at home or use voice assistants on our mobile
I hope so.
device. PwC did a study earlier in the year, but right now we're only using it for checking the weather and what our day looks like coming up, and perhaps training it to do a few party tricks or jokes for our children. So, but where do you see it really going? It seems to me that it's going to be another transformational type of impact on the advertising industry. What should advertisers be thinking about when it comes to voice search in the future?
So it's interesting because we got a little tripped up on the words because I'd say there's a macro trend that advertisers should be laser focused on, which is around consumers' needs for assistance. So we see in the research over and over and over again that people expect any of their experiences anywhere, from brands or otherwise, to really be assisting them in managing through their sort of crazy, hectic, multitasking lives. And so, I'd sort of elevate the notion of assistance for brands to be thinking more broadly about that. That I think applies to the assistant in a very specific way, which is, if you think about having frictionless, seamless assistive experiences, first of all, things like being able to use voice when your hands are tied up, or natural language processing is actually quite key to that, right? Nobody wants to remember, how do I say this in a way that Google or whoever else can understand? And so I think we're making much more progress to having the assistant be able to help just be a seamless part of our lives. I do think, though, to your point, today there's only so much scale in the applications because we're not yet trained fully to use the assistant more broadly. And so where we see brands being sort of most impactful, and what we would encourage them to do, is think about how do you approach the idea of assistance and the idea of voice at scale. And there's a couple things about that, right? I'd say there's three stages. One is, how are you thinking about generating awareness for whatever kind of voice or assistive experience you're trying to drive? Folks kind of forget that sometimes. Second, in the experience itself, are you building not just for home assistants, but to your point, for mobile, for messaging apps? I mean, even today, rich media and display, you can have a lot of the similar types of interactions. And then third, how are you driving engagement further once people are aware and using it, whether that's through notifications from the assistant or remarketing or other ways you can sort of bring them back in. So we're trying to make it easier for folks. We have certain tools that let you manage the content across all of these different areas, almost like you would be managing a blog, and then it just customizes for all the various outputs. Or, for example, we launched a couple months ago something called Shopping Actions, which is the ability for brands to use the feeds they already have with us for all of their commerce in order to have an easier shopping experience on the assistant. But I think the macro thing is we're early days with this, and I do think experimentation is very important for brands to start to wrap their head around what this can and should look and feel like. I would just encourage them to really think about sort of how do you maximize the use of that at scale today without treating it as sort of a one-off experiment over there.
Well, I look forward to coming back to the Outlook next year and seeing what's been done with the assistant.
Me too.
So wrapping us up here, we're about a week and a half away from Cannes Lions, where many of us in the room will be heading for the advertising industry. What are you excited about? What do you think you'll see there? Anything on your mind before we head out?
I love Cannes. I mean, storytelling is still the heart of our business, and I hope I'll see a lot of things that we've touched on earlier. I guess the only thing I would add is Fearless Girl won the Grand Prix at Cannes last year, and I think that did a lot to elevate the discussion around women in advertising and diversity, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that will play out in terms of speakers and topics and work this year. I'd also say this is a special Cannes for us because we're incredibly honored to have been selected as Creative Marketer of the Year. And a big part of the reason for that was actually our commitment to inclusiveness in advertising. And we work incredibly hard, as you would expect for our business, to ensure that our advertising reflects different languages, different cultures, different perspectives, sort of a wide variety of what could fall under sort of the umbrella of inclusiveness. And I think it's that diversity that actually is critical to true creativity and to creativity that is effective. So I'm looking forward to seeing more examples of that across the board.
Absolutely. We'll definitely see that for sure. Well, thank you again for joining us today. It's been great to have this conversation with you, and hope you all enjoy the rest of the speakers coming up.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thank you.